Thank you. Thank you, Mary. I made this presentation to be about 15 minutes long, so it's kind of difficult to do 50 years of landmarks history in 15 minutes. So bear with me, and there'll be plenty of time for questions, and feel free to send me questions after the presentation or give me a call or whatever. The title slide has a picture of Schifferstadt, which is probably the landmarks facility that most of you know and love. And this is a picture of Schifferstadt with its newly restored doors and windows. That was a project that just took place last fall. We were closed for a good period of time for that project, as well as for because of the pandemic. So we just reopened actually on a very limited basis in December. So I just wanted to start with that slide and let you know that we were open. You can make reservations online. Next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about Frederick County Landmarks. We are a private nonprofit organization. Our mission is to promote the preservation of historic sites, structures, natural landmarks, and communities. And we do own and operate 3 historic structures here in Frederick, one being Schifferstadt Architectural Museum, one being the Beatty-Cramer House, and the third being the Zion Church and Cemetery property, which is in Urbana, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. Next slide, please. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of start off with a little bit of a timeline. Frederick County Landmarks sort of got started because of 4 women who thought there needed to be something done to preserve the history of Frederick. And after the passage of the National Historic Preservation Act in 1966, and I've given a little bit of information about what that was, they decided that they really needed to form together. So it was really these 4 women. They're known as the founding mothers of Frederick County Landmarks. It's Birch Hotz, Fritsie Kelly, and Lebherz, and Maggie Kline were the 4. And they organized the Frederick community to do something to preserve the history. Coincidentally, the very first meeting of Frederick County Landmarks Foundation, I discovered, was held February 28th, 1972 at Rose Hill Manor. So almost exactly 50 years. This was sort of an informational meeting. We were not incorporated. It wasn't anything official. It was just sort of a gathering of people trying to determine who was interested in such a thing. As you see here, the Articles of Incorporation were signed on March 20th of 1972 by the founding mothers. The very first property that was purchased, of course, was Schifferstadt. And the Schifferstadt property was owned. Let me back up just a little bit. For those of you who are not familiar with Schifferstadt, Schifferstadt is known as the oldest document residence in the city of Frederick. It was purchased and then built on by the Brunner family. The original purchaser of the land was Joseph Brunner. His youngest son Elias built the Schifferstadt house as we know it today. It stayed in the Brunner family for a number of years, went through several different family generations, and then was purchased by the Krantz family in the late 1890s. The Krantz family owned that property up until late 1960s when they wanted to sell it. So there was a real risk at that time, and we always tell this story at Schifferstadt that, you know, it could have been turned into anything. There was a chance it could have been torn down and turned into a gas station, et cetera, et cetera. So what the founding mothers wanted to do was to purchase the property. So they had been incorporated and they were able to get an interest-free loan, $65,000, to purchase the Schifferstadt property. So next slide, please. Thank you. So you'll see there on July 1st, 1974, the deed was signed from the Krantz family to Frederick County Landmarks Foundation. And then they continued to pay off that mortgage until 1995. And I'll tell a little bit more about Schifferstadt here in a bit, but we'll move on to the other properties. So, and you'll notice here in June of 1996, Frederick County Landmarks received a deed from Blake Construction for the Beatty-Cramer House. And then in 2005, the deed was signed from the Diocese of Maryland Protestant Episcopal Church to Frederick County Landmarks, and that was for the Zion Church and Cemetery property. Schifferstadt was named a National Historic Landmark in December of 2016. Beatty-Cramer House was just named last summer to the Frederick County Register of Historic Places. So more about these properties here in just a little bit. Next slide, please. Okay, so I thought it would be interesting. I love looking at old deeds. I'm always going into land records and pulling up things. So I decided to go in and pull the deed from July 1st, 1974, from the Krantz family to Landmarks. And this is the deed for the Schifferstadt property. Near the corner of Rosemont Avenue and 2nd Street, known as Schifferstadt. And you'll notice the unusual spelling of Schifferstadt on that deed. Schifferstadt. And we do have that spelling in a lot of the old records. Next slide, please. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, Schifferstadt was named a National Historic Landmark in December of 2016. I know everybody in this room knows the difference between a National Historic Landmark and being on the National Register, but the NHL status is really the highest category of historic property. It recognizes historic properties of exceptional value to the nation. So that was a big deal. There are only 2 sites in Frederick County that I'm aware of at this time who have NHL status. One is Schifferstadt, one is Monocacy Battlefield. The nomination for Schifferstadt cited its national significance for its architecture as an outstanding example of a Georgian-style house influenced by German cultural and construction traditions. The house embodies how German immigrants, the Brunner family from Schifferstadt, Germany, chose to retain much of their cultural heritage within their homes while exhibiting their social and economic status. So that's just a little bit of why Schifferstadt did receive the NHL, and that was a huge accomplishment and a huge part of our story. We held a big event in the summer of 2017, and we invited some of the Brunner family descendants to come, and we just really had a celebration that home was being celebrated for what it was. Next slide, please. So I've included here just a couple of scenes. I'm sure most people in the room have been to Schifferstadt. If not, I encourage you to come to the open house tomorrow afternoon. We will have docents there, and they will explain all of these features and tell you a little bit more about the history of the house. On the left, you'll see a picture of the kitchen area and the cook stove that was used. The pink walls, we call it Palatinate pink. That's a color that was found in the Palatinate part of Germany, which is where the Brunner family originated. Over on the right, you'll see the kitchen sink. That particular piece was found way back in the very beginning when Frederick County Landmarks took over the property. And we brought in some different historic archaeologists and experts to tell us what to do with the property. And they found this piece, the story goes, outside the door, and it was being used as the stoop to the door to come in. So they realized what it was, and it was restored to its location. There's a little spout off the back side that drains water or whatever out to the outside to a trough or whatever, so it could be reused. So it's kind of a unique feature. People love our kitchen sink story. It's made out of soapstone. Okay. Our 5-plated stove at Schifferstadt is actually one of the very unique features. It is believed to be the only remaining example of a German 5-plated stove anywhere in the country. There is a date on it. If you look very closely at the very bottom, there's an inscription on that that actually reads 1758, and that is believed to be the time period when that stove was cast in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And normally what would happen is the stove would be placed in position, and it was in between 2 walls. This is actually between the 2 walls of the upstairs bedrooms. And it provides heat, radiant heat to both rooms at the same time. So it's actually part of the wall structure. There were originally 3 of these stoves in the house, but we only have 1. And as I said, it's believed to be the last remaining example of one of these still in its original position. And then over on the right, I've included just a picture of our heritage garden, our award-winning heritage garden, which is maintained by volunteers, master gardeners who work very diligently all through the spring and summer to make this beautiful garden enjoyable to every visitor in Frederick. We have a ton of people who come by, walk through the garden. Sometimes they pick flowers and take them home, which is wonderful, but it is open. The garden is open all the time. There is a fence around it, but we do encourage people to come in and just enjoy it. Next slide, please. Okay, I mentioned earlier that we just underwent a window restoration project at Schifferstadt, and I thought I'd just show you some pictures before and after. So certainly on the left, you can see how much we needed that restoration project, and over on the right, you can see our lovely new windows, and the frames are now painted an historic shade of red. And we've gotten a lot of compliments. I think it looks a lot better. And it's very kind of eye-popping. I think it took some people a little bit of time to get used to that. Thank you, Mary, for that comment. But we've gotten a lot of very favorable comments on the window shade and color. So it's made a big difference. We are in the process of finishing up some work on the house. We have some mortar work and some work that will be done on the front door stoop. There's a stone there, and we will be doing some work on that to help us keep water away from that front door. We've had a problem with water, and it's kind of ruined, created a stain on their front door. So you'll be seeing some work done, and a lift actually at Schifferstadt here probably in the next month or so. We will be doing some work on the roof and on that front step, trying to divert the water away from that front door. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, moving on to the Beatty-Cramer House. Probably not many of you have made it to the Beatty-Cramer House. As I mentioned earlier, when I was going through the overview, we received the Beatty-Cramer House. Let's see here, backing up here. From Blake Construction Company. It is located on Route 26, just past Israel's Creek. And this is an aerial shot of Beatty-Cramer before Landmarks purchased it. It was known as the Sanner Farm, and they sold it to Blake Construction, which then in turn sold it to us. Moving on to the next slide, please. So here's some pictures of Beatty-Cramer in the last couple of years. You'll notice on the left, that's the current picture of Beatty-Cramer, and that's what you'll see if you go out there tomorrow. Joe Lubazinski is the facilities director there. He has been involved in that house for many, many years, and for him, it is truly a labor of love. And he will be there tomorrow for at least a portion of the day. So I do hope if you get there, you'll be there while he is there. We have a very active Beatty-Cramer committee that has been working on different projects over the years to try to get funding to stabilize that house. And you'll hear a little bit more about that later. And then over on the right, you'll see a picture from a couple of years ago. So you can see it's a little bit, you know, we're coming along and doing some stabilization work. So that is an ongoing project for Landmarks. Moving on to the next slide, please. And a couple more pictures of the Beatty-Cramer House. Over on the left, you'll see 1987, which is a little bit closer to when Landmarks took it over. In 1997, you'll see it's looking rather festive. Back in those early years, we did have some events at the Beatty-Cramer House. Next slide. So here is something I found in our archives. The Susanna Beatty wagon train. Susanna Beatty, for those of you who do not know, Susanna Beatty was the original owner of the Beatty-Cramer House. She was originally from New York, and she came down to Frederick County with her children in the 1730s. She is considered to be one of the first female landowners in Frederick. She was a widow, and she is the one who was the owner of that property. So that's why it's called a, and what they did is they had this wagon train back in the 1999s to commemorate her arrival in Frederick County by wagon. So there was this big event and living history festival at the Beatty-Cramer House. So I just wanted to include some pictures of that because I thought it's just kind of a fun thing. And one of our founders, Birch Hotz, drove the wagon train. I've included a couple pictures of some archaeology projects that were done at the house, and this was again during the period in the late, probably the late 1990s. And that is Hetty Ball-Weber, who has done a lot of archaeology. She did archaeology also at the Schifferstadt site. So there were a couple of test pits that were done, and we made some very interesting discoveries. There are some reports on that that are available if anyone else is interested. And moving on. There was some restoration work done at the Beatty-Cramer Spring House. You'll see over on the left, sort of the work in progress with some scaffolding, and there was some painting done. Over on the right, this is one of my favorite pictures I was able to unearth when I was going through some of our records. And some of you may recognize some of the people in that picture. There were only three of them I know. One is Doug Plater, one is Judy Candela, who is one of our docents still, and Joe Lubazinski is over on the right. If anybody knows the other two individuals, I'd love to hear who they are. But okay, I'll get to that question here in a little bit. Thank you. All right, moving on. Okay, so here's some pictures of the Beatty-Cramer House inside, interior. This is the East Room. And when you come out tomorrow, you will get the full tour about all the individual features that are part of that house. I do want to mention that the Beatty-Cramer House is actually the oldest known house in Frederick County. It's actually a little bit older than Schifferstadt. The difference being Schifferstadt is Frederick City, Beatty-Cramer is Frederick County. It is really notable because it's a merger of the Dutch, English, and early colonial carpentry techniques. And it's really an unusual home for this property. And I was looking for a quote here, which I don't wanted to provide here. It has been named one of the most important historical houses in Frederick. It was a Preservation Maryland 6 to Fix house a few years ago. As I mentioned earlier, it was just named to the Frederick County Register of Historic Places. And according to an individual from MHT, the Maryland Historical Trust, quote, "I cannot think of any other building that combines so many uncommon features in one place." And as we go through here, I'll show you, point out a couple other little things that are significant about this property. So this is the East Room, and you'll see this tomorrow if you come out. Next slide, please. So the Beatty-Cramer House has, as I was saying, some really unusual features. This particular one on the left is called a daisy wheel, and it was how they were able to build the property. A daisy wheel is done by a master carpenter. And what they would do is they would draw a circle using a compass, and they would go around, and then they would draw the circle, and then they would make these arcs, 6 arcs, to make the little daisy petals. And then that was used as a unit of measurement to build the house. and they would go back and refer to that, so they could make things symmetrical. And it's very commonly found. It was very commonly found in that time period. So we were really fortunate that we were able to find one of those still standing. Sorry, I'm getting distracted by the text, the messages there. Anyway, so that is that. Then of course, we do have some of the other daubing. Okay, there we go. And then these are some of the original walls and things that you'll see there at the Beatty-Cramer House. Okay, next slide, please. I do want to mention, I'm kind of going over these very, very quickly. Mary shared last night links to 2 different videos, one about the Beatty-Cramer House that was just produced by Rainer Prochaska, who is a wonderful playwright and video producer, and that was just completed. And that gives you the full history of the Beatty-Cramer House, including the story of Susanna Beatty and why and how she came to Frederick County and her son. And for those of you who are fans of Frederick County history, you may be familiar with the Repudiation Act. One of Susanna's sons was Thomas Beatty, who was one of the 12 immortal justices who were involved in the Repudiation Day event here in Frederick. So I did want to mention that. Can we back up just 1 second, please, and make sure I finished? Okay, yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that. If there was anything else I wanted to mention about the Beatty-Cramer House. Okay, let's go on to the next slide then. Thank you. Okay, Zion Church and Cemetery was established as an Episcopal church in 1802. It was the first church in the Sugarloaf Mountain area. In 1961, there was a major fire, and the church basically fell into complete and total disrepair. And then starting in 2006, after many, many, many years, there was a committee formed by residents of Urbana, led by Knight Kiplinger and Terry Grimes, and they formed the Zion Church Restoration Committee. And then they came, next slide, please. I'll just show you some pictures of what the church looked like in those days. You can tell it was completely overgrown and quite a mess. And that's what it looked like back in that time period. Next slide, please. So these are some pictures of the restoration work that was done, led by that committee. Next slide. And this is what it looks like today. So if you do make it out there tomorrow, this is what you'll see. Again, founded in 1802. It is now owned by Landmarks. We manage it. The property does not have heat. It does not have indoor plumbing, but it is very lovely inside. And we do make it available on occasion to people. So you can certainly talk to our Zion Church facility managers, and you can get in touch with them through Landmarks if you have any interest in that. Next slide, please. Again, this is what the property, I was actually out there a couple of days ago. So these pictures are from just a couple of days ago. It was a rainy day, so the pictures are a little dusk, but over there on the right, you will see the grave of a Revolutionary War soldier. So there are also some Confederate graves and some other graves from the Civil War era at this house. This is completely surrounded by new development in Urbana. It's rather difficult to find. It is located on Urbana Church Road. And it will be open again tomorrow. Next slide, please. I wanted to touch on some of the other things that Landmarks does. I mentioned, we do own and operate the 3 properties. We do have a lot of other programs that we use. We manage we have managed, at least we've only done one so far, the Historic Preservation Awards. We did one ceremony in 2019, and some of you here in this room probably are familiar with some of the winners that particular year. This was a program that was done by the city of Frederick, and we took it over in 2019, and then of course we've been into the pandemic. We are hoping to be able to resume that program though. So on the left, you'll see a picture of Catoctin Furnace. I think Elizabeth may be on the call, and that's her there in the middle with Jan Gardner. And they did receive one of the awards, and there's some of the other award winners that particular year. Next slide. We have an Adopt a Stone program where you can adopt a stone from Schifferstadt. This is a fundraiser that we use. You can purchase one of those different, not purchased specifically, but you can adopt it, adopt the stone, and for a fee, call that your own, and you'll get little certificates saying that you've adopted a stone. It is a fundraiser, and money goes to the restoration of Schifferstadt. And there are different levels and different pricing depending on which kind of stone you get. Over on the right, there is one of our plaque recipients. This is a property, I believe, down on East 3rd Street, and this was a couple of years ago. The homeowners there in the middle with their plaque, along with some members of our plaque committee. Next slide, please. Landmarks has usually 2 big fundraisers every year. We held Barnstormers last year. We had to discontinue it the year before that. Every year, the Barnstormers committee selects an area of Frederick County to highlight. This past year in the fall of 2021, we highlighted the barns of Burkittsville, and here I'm showing you pictures of 2019, and this was the area around, I can't even read what that says. I think it says, it was Kyrgyzstan and Thermont area that particular year. Over on the right, you'll see some members of the Barnstormers committee. This was a planning meeting that was held in 2019, just before the pandemic hit, when we were still meeting in person. And you'll probably see a lot of familiar faces in there. Bernie Callan is there in the middle on the right-hand side. He was a very active member of the Barnstormers committee. This year, we are in the works, in the process of planning the event, and we hope to have it in early fall. That's what we're looking at right now. Okay. Part of Barnstormers includes a plein air paint out where we have invited artists from all over. They come and they spend the day painting at the barns. And then at the end of the day, there is this amazing art sale where visitors can purchase these paintings to take home. And that's been a very popular event, and the proceeds are split between the artists and Landmarks. And then over on the right, you'll see a picture of one of our training sessions. And this is actually an added benefit of being a Barnstormers docent, is you get to spend a day or 2 with Dean Fitzgerald, who has been our resident barn expert and provides training to our barn docents every year on the history and construction of the barns. And this is one of the sessions that was held last year. Next slide, please. Oktoberfest. Everybody knows about Oktoberfest at Schifferstadt. We have not been able to hold Oktoberfest for the last 2 years due to the pandemic. Oktoberfest is held the 3rd weekend in October. That's been our traditional date. We are planning and hoping and keeping our fingers crossed that we will be able to have it this year. I've just shown you a couple pictures of one of our past Oktoberfest celebrations. 2 of our gift shop attendants there on the left, and Olivia Malunzi is one of our docents, and then I believe you'll recognize, I think that's Nancy Whitmore in there. I think most of you would recognize her, and that's in the Schifferstadt gift shop. Then over on the right, you'll see just a picture of the grounds of Schifferstadt during an Oktoberfest celebration with lots of tents and vendors and demonstrations going on. Okay, next slide. Okay. And here I've just given you the names of some of the presidents of Frederick County Landmarks through the years, starting with our very first president, Ann Lebherz, who was one of the founding mothers, and that was from 1972 to 1974. You'll also see Birch Hotz was on there a couple of different times, and I know many other names that you will recognize. And I just have to throw in there that I'm really honored to be added to the end of the list there, because it's I think those presidents who have gone before me have just done a tremendous job in preserving these landmarks of Frederick, and I'm honored to be part of that group. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a little bit of information. I know there was a couple of questions about the open houses that are going to be tomorrow. You can get all kinds of information from our docents. Thank you, Allison. I'll mention that too. So anyway, there will be open houses at the 3 landmarks facilities tomorrow afternoon from 1 to 5. Schifferstadt Architectural Museum will be open. We will have docents, and as Allison just mentioned in the chat room, there are several docents at Schifferstadt who are descendants of the original Brunner family. I'm actually one of them, and both of our museum directors at Schifferstadt right now are also descendants of the Brunner family. And those are Boyce Rensberger and Valerie Denson. The Beatty-Cramer House will be open also. And for those of you who have never been there, I strongly, strongly urge you to try to make it. It is located on Route 26, heading towards Mount Pleasant. It's just past the bridge as you cross Israel's Creek. And there'll be the banner, and you saw the pictures of what it looks like. It is immediately past Israel's Creek. As you could tell from the pictures I showed earlier, the spring house is actually right there on the creek, and it often floods. And then Zion Church in Urbana will be open as well. The latter 2 properties are rarely open to the public these days. So this is a very rare opportunity to see those. Then I just wanted you to know this is our COVID policy. We do ask people to be vaccinated and to wear masks while inside our own properties. Okay, I did that very quickly, and I'm sure there are lots of questions. I do want to mention that those 2 videos do provide a wonderful history of Schifferstadt and of Beatty-Cramer House, and provides the complete history of Susanna Beatty and her journey from New York. And I won't pretend to know that history. It's an amazing story of what Susanna Beatty did, and I strongly encourage you to watch that video. How can tours be arranged? Oh, I'm sorry. You want to do that, Mary?
No, go right ahead.
I just saw that. How can tours be arranged beyond tomorrow? As I said, we do not have tours on a regular basis for either Beatty-Cramer House or Zion Church. At Schifferstadt, tours are currently available by request only. There is a tour request form on the Frederick County Landmarks website where you can make a reservation. And then one of our tour managers, our museum managers, will get back to you about whether there's a docent available to do your tour. It can be any day of the week. This is something we started just over the winter. So any day of the week, if there's a docent available.
Jenny, do you see Wendy's question about the grounds at Beatty-Cramer?
No, let me get back down here.
For Beatty-Cramer, is the general public able to go on the grounds and view the house from the exterior other than tomorrow?
Not generally. I mean, you can ride past. There is a gate that is locked. The Beatty-Cramer House is not It's in need of stabilization. I mentioned that earlier. We are in the middle of a stabilization project. There will be work ongoing. And it's really not a property that we encourage people to wander around alone. So it's best to be there at a time when we're open and we have docents there who can assist in telling you the safety measures that need to be taken.
Zion is very accessible from the exterior.
It is. And the cemetery is very interesting to walk through. Lots and lots of history there, lots of stones, gravestones from some of the original founders of Urbana in that part of the Frederick County area. Any other questions?
Mary Ellen is just asking about Landon, but all we can say is that it's a sad situation.
Yeah, Landmarks doesn't really have any, I don't believe, we have no impact on that property. Any other questions? Yeah, sorry, Mary Ellen. Anyway, I do encourage you to come out, watch the videos, come out tomorrow. We have very well-trained docents who can share the stories of those 3 properties in much greater detail than I could today.
Right. Thank you so much, Jenny. We are, of course, running behind, and we run behind in real life too. Protein, if you don't mind, if we can start at 12:40, and that will push us everyone back 10 minutes at least for the next 2. Is that okay, Protein? Do you mind?